Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Gut Reset Summit. I'm your host, Dr. John Dempster, and today I am joined by a friend and colleague, Dr. Tamara Kung. And Dr. Kung is a licensed naturopathic doctor and practices in Toronto, Canada. Actually, Dr. Kung and I practice together in the same clinic. And so Dr. Kung helps patients break down barriers and discover ease in learning about cooking healthy, delicious meals that are tailored for each patient. And in practice, Dr. Kung specializes not only in weight loss, but in digestive conditions and the optimization of physical performance and energy. But outside the clinic, more importantly, sometimes, Dr. Kung loves cooking with and for friends and family, but she also spends as much time as she can in the outdoors and believes that the key to health is cooking, great sleep, and of course, a strong community. So, Dr. Tamara, great to have you on the Gut Reset Summit today.
Thank you for having me, John, and I'm really excited to speak with you and your community and hear about all the amazing things that we can gather together as our community to learn more about the gut.
Absolutely. Well, we have a very interesting topic that I know you are an absolute expert in, and we're going to talk a lot about cravings and the impact that has and food freedom, as you say. So before we kind of dive into some of the questions that we're going to go through today, give us a bit of a background on you. How did you end up becoming a naturopathic doctor and focusing on this area?
Yeah, so a lot of it came from watching my grandfather actually. So how he loves to eat, and one of his favorite things was eating dim sum. And I'm not sure if you know of Cantonese culture, but dim sum's a big part of it. And he loves his food, but he also started to get really sick and ill. And I watched just as a bystander translating a lot of his doctor appointments with him, and just getting overloaded with medications and drugs that weren't addressing the root cause. And so that's what pointed my attention to becoming a naturopathic doctor, is because I really wanted to learn about my patients, learn about understanding how to connect my grandfather's daily habits and eating routines, and help them understand how to shift that. Because I really believed, the eating patterns were the root cause of why he was getting all these conditions, not necessarily a lack of pills. So that's really shifted my focus in terms of working with my patients on establishing like the healthy lifestyle routines. I love food as well. And that's one of my favorite ways to start the conversation on what patients can do to empower themselves and take control with their food, especially because our nutrition environment can be very confusing, and people can develop a lot of, more of a restrictive mindset, an unhappy relationship with food. And my whole goal is to change that. I want to flip that for my patients, because food is one of the most joyful things that we have as human beings, right? And I want to make sure that we have a positive and healthy and confident relationship in our food and our food choices. So that's kind of the short pathway that I can explain on this here together.
So tell us a little bit about, this relationship with food. How do we create a healthy relationship with food? That might sound like a funny question, but there's often so many emotions tied into eating, and whether we're trying to eat to thrive, or we're trying to eat to get to a certain body shape, or to beat a certain health condition. How do we establish a healthy relationship?
So there's two parts to that equation, I would say. So healthy eating equals eating real food, which I'll define in a moment, plus diversity, which really ties in with our gut conversation as well. But there is, a lot of people trying to understand, like learn how to eat healthy, but also sustainably, right? Because everyone can go on a diet, everyone can do, a 30-day sugar-free challenge, but how do we maintain that and sustain that? And that's where I really believe the gut health component comes in, because as we'll talk about in a bit, our microbes shape how we think about food. With that gut brain connection, our microbes crave certain foods. And I really want to help patients understand, how to utilize your gut to be kind of like your second engine, your backup crew, because we can't rely on willpower alone, especially when we're stressed or tired. So we can call upon our biology, our physiology, to assist us when we need extra support.
Well, why don't we dive into that? Because that's going to be a fascinating part of our talk today is, this microbiome connection to these emotions and in especially these cravings. So what do you find to be an effective way of helping people optimize that?
So the first part is number one, we have to establish like the real food component, because if we're eating fake foods or processed foods, that's going to lay the foundation for an unhealthy gut, right? We start to grow the unhealthy or bad bacteria, just to simplify it. And I often share with my patients this visualization is like the bad bacteria are the guys that crave sugar, chocolate cake, for example. So if we feed them the fake or processed foods, we grow more chocolate cake eating bacteria. Their populations expand. And when their population grows, their voices get louder and they call to you. They scream at you to eat more chocolate cake. So it's not our fault. It's not your fault that we crave these foods, because these foods are really addicting. But the bacteria are making us, they're controlling our behavior, which is creepy. And I'm sure you've mentioned in this talk, and many of the guest speakers or your community already knows that we are more microbial DNA than we are human. Like that outnumbers us, right? So it's again helping people understand it's not our fault that we crave these things or behave this way. And utilizing the power of your bacteria, your microbiome, can be really helpful in just like understanding why and how to shift it. So number one, I always say eat real food. So how I define that is no package, no problem. Eat as much as you want, right? Like I want people to learn to trust food, especially the unprocessed foods. Like those are the things that are packed with nutrients, antioxidants, and the stuff that's going to heal you. Like I promise you, a mushroom is not the cause of why you feel this way. So just eat real foods, right? And if there is a package, I often ask patients to follow something called the 5 ingredient rule, meaning we eat foods that have 5 ingredients or less. There, we can picture what each ingredient looks like, and there's no added sugar. So no package, no problem. And your 5 ingredient rule, define your real food guide, right? So that's our foundation to, laying out a healthy, balanced bacteria in our gut. So once we get that part down, then we add on this component of diversity, right? And so when we think about your gut, and this is something I've learned from a book called The Plant-Based, what is it? Fiber Fueled, actually. Visualizing, again, my patients find it really helpful to see, kind of picture what's going on versus all the confusing nomenclature of medicine. Visualize our gut to be like a rainforest, right? It's filled with thousands of different species, and a healthy gut, a healthy rainforest is characterized by the diversity, right? If you've got thousands of mushrooms and insects and flowers and trees, like it doesn't matter if we have a forest fire that goes through or chop down a few trees, like that ecosystem is going to bounce back real quick, or it might not even feel hit, right? And that's the kind of microbiome and strength and resilience that we want in our body and our health. If we contrast that to a more barren ecosystem, or if you have a monocrop thing going on, if there's a fire or a pest infestation going through there, that ecosystem is crashing hard, and it's going to take a long, long time to come back. And unfortunately, most North Americans have that barren ecosystem, or that unsustainable ecosystem, right?
Mhm.
So this is where the diversity piece comes in, because we want to help grow all the different species of healthy bacteria in our gut. And John, what the favorite foods of our healthy bacteria are? I'm sure you've covered some of this, maybe.
Well, we've touched on, but I'd love to hear what you recommend.
So that's fiber, right? So that's your healthy bacteria's favorite foods and what they need to thrive and grow and become really diverse. And so, what are some of your favorite sources of fiber, John? I'm just curious.
Well, definitely, we love to get a variety of different types of vegetables. That's a massive one right off the bat. And especially the more diversity of the vegetables, the more diversity of your microbiome, the better your health outcomes. So that's a big one. We look at different types of ground seeds like flax seeds, and even getting into psyllium and things like that are really easy. Chia. Those are some wonderful fiber sources. But yeah, tell me more about which ones you love to use.
Yeah, so I often try to simplify it for patients too, because people sometimes are unsure of like which vegetable has fiber, which fruit has fiber, and simplify it. Like everything that grows from the ground has fiber in it. Every single plant has fiber in it, right? And so that is every vegetable, fruit, nuts, seed, beans, or lentils, even. And certain whole grains can be helpful as well, depending on the person. But those are, everything that's a plant is a fiber source. And so I often put my patients through fun challenges that I like to give them. And one of my challenges that I love watching them grow through is their plant point challenge. So I say, okay, your goal is to hit like 150 different plant points, and I give you a timeline to do so, right? So that could be something for fun for our community to do together, and sharing that as well, is to try to diversify that, every plant intake, and colors matter as well. And I say that because things like red, orange, yellow, green bell peppers, I count that as 4 different points, because not only are we looking for the diversity of fiber and polyphenols to improve the gut bacteria diversity, but I also want to change people's mindsets when they go grocery shopping. I'm here to evolve the way we think and find food as well. And so when you go to the market and you always buy kale, right? I'm always getting kale, delicious. But sometimes maybe I want you to buy a red kale because you get an extra point for red, or black kale, you get an extra point for the black. And the fiber structure may not be too different, but it starts to evolve and shape people's mindset when they go to the grocery store. They're looking at, okay, what color have I not tried yet? Or, this vegetable I've never seen before. Like, let's try that. And so some of my patients have told me they've had like fruit tasting parties, for example, where they find fruits from the exotic aisles, and then they YouTube how to like open it, and they taste it together with friends. So there's a lot of different ways we can kind of integrate this diversity piece into our day-to-day lives in a fun way as well. Right.
Amazing. You made me think of something earlier when you were talking about the rainforest analogy. One of my favorite mentors going through naturopathic medical school used to say, you can't grow daisies in cement. So it's always stuck with me that you've got to nurture that ecosystem, that environment. And, it starts by a lot of the things that you're talking about right now.
Exactly. So the diversity of food and plants is an important one. And then also the fermented food is how we also kind of reestablish a healthy microbiome, especially since most North Americans have that barren ecosystem. I find learning to incorporate and figuring out which foods are fermented foods can really start laying the foundation, that groundwork to, building up their microbial diversity as well. So, some people, if you have sparse ecosystem and you start throwing a ton of fiber in, that's actually going to cause a lot of trouble for patients because they don't have the bacteria or the enzymes to break down that fiber. So it can leave a lot of patients feeling really gassy and bloated and just uncomfortable. So diving into a bunch of fiber right off the bat may not always be the first course of action. But if we can inoculate their gut with some fermented food to start off with as well, that can start to give them that foundation to better tolerate more fiber-rich foods if that's not something that they have established yet, right?
And so what are some of your favorite fermented foods that you like to lean on?
I personally love kimchi. I put it in almost everything, and I don't know if people here like sushi, but one of my favorite foods is sushi. But I'm incredibly lazy sometimes, so I love to get the seaweed snacks, and I put sliced avocado, cucumber, and a piece of kimchi on top, and that's just like my very fast sushi that I like to snack on. I find kimchi also really great with eggs or tofu scramble. It has like a really nice balance to that texture as well.
Mhm.
And miso. Miso is something that I use as salad dressings or soup bases. And that's a really, very tasty and not too acidic form as well, because some people could be more sensitive to the acid or the cabbage, for example, to start off with. So that's, 2 different ones that I really like to lean on.
Do you find that there's any type of patient population, especially with gut issues? A lot of people listening right now have IBS or SIBO and things like that nature. Do you find that fermented foods are well tolerated by most? Are there any types of patients that should be more careful with those foods?
Yeah, definitely. Patients who do have a lot of gas and bloating, I titrate the dose. So I don't tell them to eat like a whole bunch, especially in the beginning. And something that doesn't have, the cabbages, for example, could be really hard to tolerate if we are starting off with really, a lot of gut issues. So that's where the miso can be more gentle, for example, because it doesn't actually have a ton of fiber, but it's got the bacteria. Or even drinking sauerkraut juice, for example, can
Mhm.
give you the bacteria without too much of the fiber as well. So that's, titrating the dose, building up to it is important, and also maybe not relying too heavy on the fiber abundant fermented foods first, right?
That's
Things like kefir are also really nice, and unsweetened plain kefir can be helpful as well.
great suggestions, great strategies. Another obstacle that we often see as clinicians is we see people who don't digest raw foods, especially raw vegetables, very well. If you ever have a case like that, what are some suggestions that you can offer patients?
Yeah. So again, cooking your veggies is always really important. And in Chinese medicine, that's something that's recommended for sure to help your body break down that a bit more. But again, once you start inoculating your gut with some of the fermented ones, maybe the ones we just talked about that are less fiber rich, to have that foundation. But also, I find helping my patients remember to chew is also important as well, because I know a lot of people eat in front of their computer screens or in front of their TVs, or they're just fast eaters. I'd say like 85% of my patients report being fast eaters. And so that's, again, one, I think, very obvious thing, but a really important thing to help with, mechanical breakdown of your food so that your gut doesn't have to do that mechanical breakdown. It's not meant to do that so much, right? It's supposed to happen here. But when we're shoveling food in and finishing our meals in 5 minutes or less, our fastest reported ones, I think, was like 2 or 3 minutes and down, right? That can really help with digestion, especially of raw foods as well, because
Mhm.
having ultimately the goal of having some raw, some cooked veggies is ideal, having a balance of both, right? But we want to make sure that we have the healthy enzymes or bacteria to break that down, but also we're doing a lot of the breakdown in our mouth, in our teeth as well. So fun strategy I often give my patients is a 20-minute meal challenge, because
Hmm.
as we know, it takes 20 minutes to send that satiety signal to our brain. That's why I set it for 20 minutes, but also 20 minutes to finish your meal without a screen. Okay, so screen free. And so that's a really fun and like helpful practice, I feel, to help my patients remember to chew their food, maybe put their fork down between meals, which is a brand new concept for some. And also, when you chew more, you get a natural facelift because you're activating and toning your jaws and your all the little muscles in your face as well. So, kind of a win-win with that component.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, one third of our digestion happens in our mouth, and you've already alluded to how that happens. You're sending the downstream signals to get everything prepared to receive that food. And I've been doing some research with centenarians, so people that live to over 100. And one of the common things that comes up is that they chew their food. And I never forget this one person who was interviewed said, "Well, my stomach doesn't have teeth, so I better use these ones." So I think it's just common
Go
sense, but
figure.
yeah, yeah, no, that's great. Now, I want to come back to something that I know you're also very well versed in, and that's again the emotional connection to eating. What are some of these toxic emotions that can really disrupt us? Fear, guilt, and shame with foods. There's so many diets out there. A lot of them are touted to be, one size fits all for, whether it's weight loss or whatever it might be. There can be serious emotional connections to some of these strategies, and they can be damaging. So, how do we navigate these waters?
Yeah, so this is, I think, the heart of like this is the one that I feel the most strongly towards, and it's it's about letting go of all the labels and trying to keep up with the latest nutrition fad, for example. And that's why I really ask my patients to practice their real food sense, like understanding and being able to differentiate food only based on if it's real or not. So I ask my patients now and for the rest of your life, whenever you put anything to your mouth to eat, all I want you to ask yourself is this real food or not, right? And so I don't care if it says gluten-free or vegan or keto or paleo. A lot of that stuff looks really fancy and it's marketed as healthy, but it could be fake food or processed food in disguise, right? And so that's where people get tripped up. They're like, I've been gluten-free for years. I'm eating just these like super healthy bars or this fiber one bars or things like that. And it's not working. Like I'm not losing the weight or my digestion is still off. And when we look through the ingredients together, I'm like, wow, there's still 20 plus ingredients here. And there's, sneaky words for sugar, or there's, sneaky sugar alcohols that could be damaging, or, a bunch of things that are in there that we can't picture as well. And so that's where people, I feel like, get kind of tripped up and confused, and then ultimately frustrated because we're trying to eat healthy, but it's not working. And so that's why I really want to simplify it. Like, as long as it's a real food, you're golden. Just eat it. Keep it simple. The real foods are the humble foods. They're the stuff that they know they're the best and they don't need to brag about it. The stuff that comes in the packages or have all that like fancy marketing, they're trying to make up for their deficiencies. So they got to like market a little harder. So go for the humble guys a little bit more. And so, yeah, again, simplifying what it means just to eat healthy and then learning to trust it. Right. So a lot of patients come to me with sugar cravings and I'm like, no package, no problem. Like eat as much as you want. They're like, well, how about pineapple or like mango or apples? And I'm like, they're like, there's sugar in it. And I'm like, yeah, go eat it as much as you want. I'd rather you eat a mango than, binge on a croissant later because you couldn't eat sugar and you're craving sugar. Right. And then also there's really interesting studies showing that we can trust food, real food, especially things like fruit too.
Mm-hmm.
So they did a study where they gave a group of people a bowl of Frosted Flakes and they measured their blood sugar levels and levels of inflammation in their body. And of course, after Frosted Flakes, the most sugary thing you could put in your body, their blood sugar levels go sky high, inflammation goes sky high. But to that same bowl of Frosted Flakes, they added a cup of blueberries to it, right? And so people are like, well, berries have more sugar in them, so our blood sugar should go even higher, right? But what the studies found was that actually blood sugars were lower, right, with the added blueberries. And the reason why is because of the fiber and the antioxidants in the berries. So the fiber from real food acts like a gel in our gut barrier. So it blocks us from absorbing all the sugar. So one of the things is like, yeah, trust in real food because, yeah, there's sugar in fruit, for example, but it's got the antidote to the poison. It's got fiber plus antioxidants. So the net benefit, the net gain from eating a fruit outweighs, and it's actually going to take you closer to your health goals. There's another strategy I just learned about in terms of like when we eat out at restaurants or, how to buffer that blood sugar thing in our body. Number one, eat your vegetables first, because again, that's going to build that fiber barrier so that you don't absorb all the sugar from the rest of your meal. Fiber first. Number two, eat your proteins. And then number three, then have your starch at the end, right? So that you build that fiber shield, you fill up, you get satiated on the protein, and then enjoy the starches, which don't often have like a ton of nutrient density anyways. So, save that for the end, right?
This is awesome because, one of the toughest addictions out there is sugar. In fact, we've all seen and heard of the research that it's 10 times more addictive than some of the most notorious street drugs that are out there when we've seen this observed with lab animals. And so any tips, any ways to start to break these patterns and these vicious cycles of the sugar cravings that we get is just not only from a gut health perspective, but from an overall health perspective is enormous. So I think you're really dropping some very important and salient tips that almost anyone can do right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the sugar addiction is crazy. see the research as well, and how our brain and dopamine lights up in 600 milliseconds or something like that when we eat sugar.
What else do we need to know to help sort of curb a sugar craving? And we've touched on the microbiome. We just went through some really powerful dietary, dining out strategies. Is there anything else that's outstanding that you'd recommend?
The biggest way to build sustainably and get over sugar cravings is diversifying and learning really delicious meals and go-to snacks that you can enjoy that is made from real food. Because a lot of people, again, I said, can do the sugar-free thing for a short period of time, but it's the sustainability piece that's the trickiest, right? And so that's why with my patients, I really drive home the meal preparation or like learning new recipes, because one of my patients said yesterday, I thought healthy eating was just being restricted and like not eating, not allowed to eat this and this and this. But actually, healthy eating is like, I can eat so many things but we don't have that habit yet. We're used to the same thing when we grocery shop, the same thing when we order out. But what the big goal is to help curb those cravings and kind of sustain the health benefits of eating well is to have diversity. I think that's the big component, because then you can crave a croissant once in a while. That's okay. But you'll have a croissant, plus you'll have all these other yummy real food go-tos to choose from. Like, oh, I actually like this as well. And, an apple with, a roasted apple with cinnamon and caramelized pecans with, cinnamon on top. Like, that stuff is like also very yummy. So maybe you'll choose croissant like 50 or 60% less of the time. And that, when we look across the rest of your health or life trajectory, those are the differences, or those are the changes that you can make that make a change in your trajectory of health. So it's not to say never eat these foods again. It's just to say, hey, I want you to be in control by changing your cravings, changing your microbiome, and make the choice. But also, you all have a whole bunch of different options to choose from. So it's not just defaulting to the same comfort food. You're like, got that mac and cheese, plus I've got all these other things to choose from. That naturally crowds out space for some of those old, more harmful foods as well.
Dr. Tamara, thank you for these very empowering and practical, and I think very doable strategies that can really start to help us reestablish, better control of our cravings and ultimately better health. Where can we learn more about you online?
So you can find me online at www.tamarakung.com. That's my website where you can book consultations with me to speak one-on-one. And also on Instagram, I'm at Just a Teaspoon. Those are some of the best ways that you can find me.
Well, thanks again so much, Tamara. This has been wonderful. And thank you for being a guest on the Gut Reset Summit. And thank you for all that you do. We'll see you soon.
Take care. It's a pleasure doing this with you, John. Thank you.
Bye for now.